All right, so what's new and what's coming up in the HTCondor Software Suite? It's nice to be back in person for the first time in 3 years and see smiley faces behind masks for some of you. I'm sure there's smiles behind those masks. So first off, some new terminology that we've been working on. We used to call our release series the stable series and the developer series. That is no more. The stable series is now referred to as the long-term support or LTS release channel. And the developer release, which really never was a developer release. You know, our so-called developer release was actually beta tested for quite some time. It runs in production for a minimum of 3 weeks at UW-Madison before going out. So that got renamed to the feature release. Other new terminology is, instead of talking about HTCondor, a lot of times you're going to hear us talk about the HTCondor Software Suite, or HTCSS. And what we used to refer to as the submit node in this talk and many other talks and documentation will be referred to as the access point. This is where a user places their jobs and accesses capacity. An HTCondor pool does not consist necessarily of an access point, but consists of execution points, what we used to call execution nodes that run start keys, and a central manager. And Marone talked about this change in terminology this morning, and I think he's going to take a deeper dive into it in his talk tomorrow. The HTCondor CE used to be called the HTCondor compute element. It is now called the compute entry point, because that's a much better name for it. And then OSG, we no longer refer to that as the Open Science Grid. We refer to OSG as OSG. And to help you remember it, my memory mnemonic is just like Kentucky Fried Chicken is no longer Kentucky Fried Chicken. It is just KFC. So that helps me remember the OSG thing. Maybe Marone can be the kernel of computing. That's another memory helper for you. So a year ago, in the long-term support releases, we had just released 9.0 that had 71 documented enhancements. And last year, we spent a lot of time going over what was new and different in 9.0. Since then, we've had 12 updates. So we use semantic versioning now. So what's on the web right now is 9.0.12. So those are bug fixes only. And the feature releases is at 9.8. So we've had 7 releases with new features. So in terms of updates since last year, let's see if my little laser pointer works. Not really. So since last year, I put a URL up on the slide where you can get the highlights of all the changes that happened in all the new feature releases. So if you want to go back to your email, you can just click on this link at your leisure. Or I will continue with the talk and talk about just some of the big items that have been keeping us off the streets. Because going over everything that's in these highlight URLs would take more time than we care to spend, and we have we do have a social event later tonight that we probably all want to get to. So what was introduced in the long-term supported version of 9.0? So first of all, there's a fast one-line install and configure. So you do a one-line installation and you get a secure by default installation of HTCondor. So no longer does it rely on host-based authentication, but it actually sets it up using ID tokens. So if you go online and go to the manual, there's a section called Getting HTCondor. And you can see there is literally one line to cut and paste, set up a new central manager, set up a new access point, and set up one or more execution points. We also distribute HTCondor as Docker images if you want to use it with Docker or say Kubernetes. And on the slide from last year, I include a link to a YouTube video where I set up an access point and an HTCondor pool with ID tokens in, I think it's about 3.5 minutes. So you can watch that. That's starting at minute 4 in that YouTube video. So what was introduced new in 9.0 for end users? The answer is a lot. Transfer job data to and from Amazon, Google Drive, OneDrive, improved support for GPUs, new tools like Condor Watch Queue, improvements to the Python bindings, including bindings for Dagman from Python, lots of stuff. But you can watch on YouTube at the URL I have here of Christina going over everything that is new from a user perspective in 9.0. What about for our unsung heroes, the sysadmins? There's new stuff for them as well. All the security work that we've been talking about, ID tokens, side tokens, OAuth 2. 9.0 has new packaging. We have a tool included in HTCondor to take job history class ads and push them into Elasticsearch so that you as an administrator of a pool can figure out what's going on. There is going to be a talk by Jason, I believe tomorrow, covering this in more detail. We have a data flow mode for jobs, which basically when a job starts, if your transfer output files already exist on your access point and they're newer than your input files, the job can be just skipped. All kinds of good stuff. And you can click on this link and again, go to YouTube and see Greg Thane do a quick whirlwind tour of new features for administrators in 9.0. So, what have we been up to in the past year? What have we been working on besides, in the past year playing Wordle, right? Which everybody's been playing Wordle. So by show of hands, who here has played Wordle in the past year? A lot of people. Okay, keep your hands up. I didn't say put them down. Simon says, Todd says. Who here thinks they're actually pretty good at Wordle? But hold up your second hand. I want to see 2 hands. Okay, all righty then. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to make 2 teams because something I've also been up to in the past year is just a little side project. I call it HT Wordle. And to play HT Wordle, you play it just like the actual game of Wordle. Same rules, except the winning word is something commonly used in HTCondor. I promise you, you have heard the winning words multiple times at the tutorials yesterday. Quiet. Eject this man from the, but I also like Family Feud, right? So who doesn't like Family Feud? So with HT Wordle, you have 2 teams. Each team has a captain. And when it's your turn, the captain solicits input from their team. So your team members just shout out words that you think should be played next. And at the 20-second mark, because everything in HTCondor is a 20-second timeout, as people know, 20 seconds, the captain picks a word and we put it up on the big board. So let's play some Wordle. Everybody who raised their hand that's familiar with Wordle, that's on this side of the room, you guys are team 1. And everybody on this side is team 2. Team 1 captain, how about you right there? You said you were good at Wordle. That's the team 1 captain. And the team 2 captain, Mr. Nursk. All right. And because this is serious business, we're playing for prizes up here. So the winning team will get a spoil of Wisconsin local Madison beer and chocolates. And the losing team, because nobody loses at Condor Week, will have food and beer purchased for them courtesy Google Cloud at the social. All right, team 1, stand up. Everybody on team 1, if you had your hand up and you're on this side of the room, stand up. Captain, you ready? All right, you have 20 seconds starting now for your first word. Everybody has their favorite first word in Wordle.
I think we'll go with token.
Token. All right, they're taking a given strategy here. Okay, team 2, stand up. Team 1, sit down. No, now are different words.
This is gonna get
Okay, you have 20 seconds. Your solicit input from your team. On Family Feud, they yell, so feel free to yell.
Pilot.
You can guess anything. So it's Wordle rules. Any noun, anything that's in the dictionary.
Rose.
Any word that's in the dictionary.
A rose.
What's that?
A rose. Like,
Oh, a rose. Oh, that's a common Wordle.
yeah.
All right, team 1. Team 1, 20 seconds. It's not in a dictionary, right? Ten seconds. Okay, Captain. Five seconds, Captain.
a stash.
Okay, team 2, 20 seconds. It has to be, it's Wordle rules, it has to be in the dictionary. Five seconds, team 2. 3, 2, Captain, we need a word.
Unity.
What's that?
Unity.
All right, team 1, 20 seconds.
We would like to go with batch.
Doo, doo, doo. Okay, team 2, let's see if you can tie them. You can tie them right here.
No, we can't do. There's O, I.
5 seconds, team 2. All right, we need a word.
No.
Well,
Slice.
no. Okay. All right, 5 seconds.
Files.
Very good. Woo! All right, team 1 won it by just 1. So at the end of the session, feel free to come up and pick up your spoils, Captain, and you can distribute them as you see fit. So other things besides HT Wordle that we've been doing is we're going to be doing updates to the website and to the manual to reflect the new terminology and the fact that we're now a software suite. You may have noticed that the website has undergone some major upgrades already. The manual, not so much, but it will. Upcoming OS and architecture support. Life used to be simple since many in the HTCondor, HTCSS community were using CentOS 7. And we thought we would just go to CentOS 8, but it doesn't work that way. So what we have right now is support for Enterprise Linux 8. It's built off of Rocky. The Enterprise Linux 8 binaries do work on Stream 8. And that is by design, as I was discussing with visitors here from Red Hat. Thank you very much. We also have, we've been working on ARM and PowerPC binaries. We have built test binaries that have been tested out by our friends Pegasus and our friends at CMS. And we plan to have those officially on the website by summer, sometime this summer. And then a couple weeks ago, Enterprise Linux 9 came out of beta and got released. So our plans for supporting Enterprise Linux 9 and Stream 9 are more like the end of the year because we have some challenges due to changes in underlying libraries we rely upon. For instance, OpenSSL 2 is gone in Enterprise Linux 9, and it's now OpenSSL 3, which is good, but HTCondor used SSL 2, and then a lot of our dependencies that we use, like the BLAP and other pieces. So JSON Web Tokens library we're using uses SSL 2. So we have to get those dependencies up to snuff as well. So there's a way to stop runaway jobs. Not quite as dangerous as runaway trains, but still not desirable. So in HTCondor, there's always been the way to put on the execution point a preempt expression that says, no matter what, kick the job off when these conditions become true. But this allows end users or access point administrators to say at the access point, this job should not run longer than X amount of time for any reason. And if it does, the job goes on hold with a clear reason saying it's a runaway job. There's also allowed execute duration, which is the time from when the job is exec to when it exits, either because it completed or it's checkpointing. And there's a lab job duration, which includes the transfer input and transfer output time. So you can also put a cap essentially on how long transfers take. Job sets. So you can submit many jobs in one Condor submit go, and you get what's called a cluster ID back. But users want to think about sets of jobs as it relates to their mental model and not just based on when they run Condor submit. So for instance, a set of jobs that are all analyzing a specific genome, or a set of jobs that are analyzing images captured on a certain date. And then users want to be able to manage these jobs as a set and also get aggregated statistics across all jobs in the set. What was the total job runtime of all these jobs in the set? What was the total amount of bytes transferred for all these jobs in the set? So this was introduced in HTCondor 9.0. It's documented in the manual. I don't know what's up with these little yellow blobs, but you don't need to have yellow blobs when you do it. So there is a job set description file, and the job set description file will include a name, an iterator, and then one or more jobs. So you can think of it kind of like DAGman. DAGman, you describe the structure of your DAG, and then you point to job files. With a job set description, you describe, how to iterate across a set of jobs, and then you point at the jobs. So you can check out the manual for that. So we are also experimenting with new command line user interfaces. So our legacy tools, as we're calling it, Condor Q, Condor Submit, they aren't going anywhere. They're not going away. But we decided to experiment with new ways of interfacing at the command line. So there's a HTCondor tool, and you give it a noun and a verb. So you can say like HTCondor space job, submit, remove, status, so on and so forth. You can say HTCondor DAG, submit, remove, status. You can say HTCondor job set, submit, status, all that stuff. So one thing that's nice about this is, the new tools don't have the notion of everything has to be condensed to one line, like some kind of, serial printer from the 70s. So if you say HTCondor job status and you give a job ID, it gives an English description of all kinds of things that could be interesting about that one job. Oh, it's running, it started X hours ago, it's currently using this much memory. End users don't have to sit and memorize various class add attributes and what they mean. Here's an example too of the envisioned output for, say, HTCondor job set status. In my set, I currently have 6 jobs running in my set and 4 completed, and it's used a total amount of wall clock time, aggregates and stats. So container work. The Docker and Singularity support in HTCondor has proved to be a very popular. Docker Universe, I know here at UW-Madison is heavily used. But does the end user really care about the container runtime or CR, right? If I want to run my job in a container as a user, do I care if it's going to use Docker to put my job in a container, or Podman or Singularity? Most users do not care at all, right? So in the current world order, you would have to say universe equals Docker and then a Docker image. Or in Singularity, it's even kind of uglier, where you do plus Singularity image and then you give the image name. So by the way, quick comment about this plus notation, which is to insert a custom attribute into the job ad. So an attribute that is has meaning to the access point. We have added a first-class way for an access point administrator to promote attributes to be first class, so users don't have to put the plus sign, and it's able to do some basic checking on validity checking. And you'll want to look in the manual for extended submit commands. So as an AP admin, you can now control the submission language or customize it. So anyhow, instead of Docker universe and Singularity support, we now have a new job universe called the container universe. And the idea is you just give the location of your container image, and the execution point looks at the execution point when HTCondor starts up there will analyze what runtimes are available. Is Singularity there? Yes, no. Is Docker there? Yes, no. And it'll advertise in its ad what runtimes are available, and the access point will just pick which execution points are able to run your container, and the user doesn't have to know the details. So for instance, if the user says my container image equals a myimage.sif, well, HTCondor knows that requires Singularity, so it'll look for an execution point with Singularity, since SIF is the Singularity image format, right? Oh, it went too far. GPU scheduling improvements. If you were at the tutorials yesterday, TJ went over a bunch of this work in detail, but HTCondor's long been able to schedule, detect and manage GPU devices. A little more recently, the past maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago, we added the ability to monitor and report GPU processor utilization and memory utilization. And in 9.8, there's support for heterogeneous GPUs in one server. So for instance, if you had one server that had some old GTX 970 card and a spanking new A100 card, HTCondor can deal with that now. And what users put in their submit file is they would say request number of GPU devices, and then they can say require GPUs and give an expression like, CUDA capability is greater than 7. Interestingly enough, this heterogeneous GPU support is also very much needed to support MIGs of devices, because the MIG capability splits up an NVIDIA GPU into multiple baby GPUs, and these multiple baby GPUs are rarely homogeneous. So that's pretty neat. We're also working on the ability to have concurrent GPU jobs running on one device. So let's talk a minute about how the access point and the central manager interact. So as it is today, the negotiator sees all the users, okay? So you have an access point that has jobs for user ABC, another access point with jobs for user DEF, and the negotiator sees all of it and tries to do a fair share between all the individual users. And the question on the table is, should the central manager, in this case, see all the users? And the answer, like every expert has the same answer, is it depends. And in many cases, it's maybe not the right thing to do. So in the cases where it's not the right thing to do, we're doing work so that the negotiator sees only the access points. So instead of arbitrating amongst individual users, it's arbitrating in a fair share manner or via quotas across access points. So it's assigning resources to access points. And then the access point is responsible for assigning it across the users on that access point in any way it sees fit. So this requires the access point to do more work, but also gives the access point more power. So the access point will be empowered to do fair share. It could hold slots if it thinks, you know, they're black holes. It could do draining and merging. So maybe you don't need some kind of global defrag policy. And the access point would have some notion of accounting. So this is something that's keeping Greg up late at night. He's working. Bring your own capacity. The idea is to be able to add additional execution points that your access point can leverage to run your workloads. We want to be users to be able to add capacity to local clusters, for instance, a Slurm cluster on campus, add capacity from clouds. And we've seen talks on this work, and there will be more talks on getting capacity from clouds from Google tomorrow. And then also talks on getting capacity from HPC centers and supercomputers. We've heard a couple today on this. We're going to hear another very nice one from Maria. I think she speaks right after me. And tomorrow, because they're brave, Todd and Matthias are going to give a live demo of adding HPC capacity in the OSG/OS. We've done several security enhancements. As I said, host-based security is no longer default. Brian mentioned in his TOFU talk earlier today about the trust and first use capability for SSL. Brian also talked about how we can remove the need for having an ID token signing key on every execution point in your pool. And this is because the execution points are essentially advertising a secret capability to the collector. And then administrators, if they can authenticate that the collector is an administrator, they're able to get the secret capability and then do administrative commands on the execution points, removing the need to distribute signing keys out into the yonder. And we've done some improvements on replay attacks, especially for the OSG community and the WLCG community. There's been a lot of work in HTCSS to assist in the GSI to token transition. I think we've said a lot about that already today. And we've also not forgotten the HTCondor CE. We've added a new syntax for writing job routes for the CE. This new syntax has some nice benefits. Statements are evaluated in the order they're written. You can have variables that don't end up actually in your job ads. There's simple case statements, and I put a URL here to the HTCondor CE documentation that goes over the improvements with this new routing syntax. We added a mechanism for a CE. Typically, in this case, it would be a hosted CE like OSG does, to access capacity like a Slurm cluster that is sitting behind two-factor authentication. So the hosted HTCondor CEs access, for instance, a Slurm front-end node via SSH. But some sites are like, well, you need two-factor authentication anytime you SSH in. So that was a problem, and we have a mechanism to deal with that. Also, when a job goes along a route in the CE, we added the ability to insert an ID token. So did we miss something that your organization needs? Or did we miss something that you think your science is going to rely on more heavily in the future down the road? One thing I'll throw out there is more reliance on data and mechanisms for data. So, one thing I neglected to mention is better space storage on the execution point is something that's coming into HTCondor later this week. Is that right, Greg? Literally in the release later this week, where the storage on the execution point is actually a file system will get made on the fly, or it'll use the logical volume manager to make the execute directory on the execution point. So the user's job is not able to go over the amount of disk that they requested, and the job will just immediately go on hold if it does. But if there's something your science requires, bring it up in the town hall meeting, which is happening at the end of today. That's all I have. Thank you.